Okay, well, we're going to talk about intelligence today. There's an entire chapter devoted to intelligence in psychology, so it's clearly something that's important to psychologists and to understand what it means and what it predicts. Well, you know, some of the questions about what is intelligence and are there different types and how do you best measure it? There's as many things in psychology, there's some disagreement. Um, and I'll try to point those out as we kind of go along today and talk about them. Sort of tell you what the consensus is, if there's any. Generally speaking, IQ is a term that refers to intelligence quotient. It's a score that you receive on an intelligence test. And again, though, the meaning has kind of changed over time, and we can sort of talk about, it reflects a kind of problem-solving ability, but it really is. It gets assessed as much more broad than that. The history is one where the first IQ test was developed in France by Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon in the early 1900s, and they created the test so that they could identify students who needed some extra help. And so they tested a lot of normal children at each of these ages, and then some children that were experiencing problems. And what they did was they created a kind of, they took someone's mental age, but then they also, their chronological age, but they gave them a mental age score. And so it would be something like if you were 10 years old, but you had a mental age, mental age of 9, 9 divided by 10 times 100, you'd have an IQ of 90. Or if you had a mental age of 11 and you were 10, you'd have an IQ of 110. And so you can get a sense for how they figured that out. Now, in the United States, Lewis Terman from Stanford University developed an American version of the Binet-Simon test, and he called it Stanford Binet. And this was for kids 2 years all the way to adults. And then that was used for many years. Now, David Wexler has come through and came and developed the Wexler intelligence scales for adults and children, where you get actually performance and verbal kind of IQ and then a whole IQ. And then this has really become the kind of gold standard in IQ testing. Here's an example of some of the types of items in the verbal and performance scale. So sometimes they ask questions about general information, or do you have how well are you able to comprehend stuff? Interestingly, arithmetic gets kind of bunched in with this verbal scale, but they ask questions about similarities. How are two objects similar? Digit span, which is more remembering numbers forwards and backwards and repeating those back, and then vocabulary. What do certain words mean? And then there's more of a performance scale that has you, again, kind of remember certain symbols that are associated with numbers, or complete something that's like a puzzle, where they give you blocks and you have to complete a design, or you have to tell them, I'm sorry, the picture arrangement was more like the puzzle. Picture completion is more telling them what's missing in a picture, and then object assembly is more like putting a puzzle together. So there's arranging pictures, putting pieces together like a puzzle, pointing out, either blocks or like regular sort of puzzle pieces. It just taps into a variety of different things, as you can see here. What happened was, in the old days, as I mentioned, when mental age was divided by chronological age by 100, it created a problem. That is, people got older. It created some problems. They didn't actually look less intelligent. Now everything has been standardized using statistics on big standard samples, and so now we know that, or through statistics, we know that the average is 100, and that one standard deviation above the mean, or 100, is 34% of the population. Between 1 and 115, and you can see the distribution here. So if you have an IQ between 115 and 130, then again you're it's sort of in the top. It's like 16%, and as you get above IQs of 30, you're in really rare territory. Only a couple, a small percentage of the population smarter, and likewise. So, and when you get below an IQ of say 70, which usually indicates an intellectual disability, you're talking about less than 3% of the population, 2.5% of the population. Remember, we talked about this a while ago, that a test had to be valid and reliable. IQ tests are pretty good. Certainly the Wechsler or the Stanford-Binet, they produce pretty consistent results over time, unless, again, you had something happen to you. The question is, does the test measure what it's supposed to? Well, if you believe that all of the things that were assessed in those subscales somehow are an indication of intelligence and problem solving and stuff, then yeah, you would say it is valid. But this is where people kind of disagree. So what does IQ predict? Well, it does predict how you'll do in school and your college grades, but it's not a great prediction. It does correlate some with job prestige and how much money you'll make, and whether you'll have a stable marriage, and whether you go to jail. But again, these are very small correlations. Most of the contributors to whether we go to jail, or if we have a stable marriage, or a good job, or get good grades, are not related to IQ. They're related to motivation and other factors. So, again, the IQ accounts for a small variation. Motivation, education, culture, these are all important. And again, these are just correlations. Don't, just because one is correlated with the other doesn't mean that it caused it. Doesn't mean an IQ caused someone to go to jail or something. The other debate was whether intelligence is just one kind of construct, one thing. You either have it or you don't, or it reflects many different it's a composite of different primary mental abilities. Spearman was one of these people who said that intelligence is mostly G, this one thing. You either got it or you don't. And Thurston said no. When he used the factor analysis, he said, now there are distinct groups of kind of primary mental abilities and that are more important than this overall G factor. There are other, of course, researchers, Cattell and Horn, said no, there's two types. There's a crystallized versus a fluid intelligence. The crystallized being the kind of more factual, and fluid, the kind of more problem solving. And they showed evidence that these types of intelligence are differentially affected by age and whatnot. So there's a case there. I think there's kind of an emerging view now, this kind of Carroll's three-strata model that says, yeah, there is a general intelligence, but there's also a second strata of about 6 other broad abilities, and then even a third strata that has 69 specific abilities. And so, does your G influence your ability to, your broad abilities and specific abilities? Yeah. But they're distinct as well, and there's a lot of, as you get down, if you get to these 69 specific abilities, there's a lot of differences between people, real, significant differences between people in these abilities. There's something too called emotional intelligence, and people have often said, that some people just have this incredible kind of innate emotional intelligence. They can manage, they know their feelings, they can manage them. They can recognize emotions with others. They're great at handling relationships and stuff like that. Women, tend to be a little higher in this than men, but they say this is as every bit of a predictor of success as, say, your traditional IQ. And then you have someone like Howard Gardner again, who says that the new version, or the old version of intelligence is much too limited, and intelligence can reflect linguistic and spatial and music and bodily, kind of athletic and dance and intrapersonal and intra, knowing yourself and knowing others, and existential and all these other things. And so again, there are people who are saying that our current conceptualization of intelligence is just much too narrow. So again, what else do we know about brain size and intelligence? Well, it's not so much the size of the brain as crucial areas of the brain. Not surprisingly, the frontal lobe and other parts are probably more important to intelligence than the olfactory cortex or something. Females tend to have smaller brains, but they have equal IQs. So there's somewhat a function, I think, of overall body size. So really, the correlation between brain size and intelligence is pretty small. And again, it's correlational, not really causation. There does seem to be a correlation between IQ and the speed that you process information, at least in some. But remember, a lot of the subscales on IQ tests are actually timed, and so it's one of those kind of chicken-egg things. If you incorporate timed speed into an IQ test, then of course it'll be correlated with kind of IQ in the end, or it's likely to be. It does also seem to be correlated with working memory, working memory. But again, a lot of the IQ subscales actually involve memory, so how could it not somehow be correlated with that? There's definitely a genetic component to it. So when they look at these identical twins or adopted twins, you see a pretty strong genetic component, but a strong environmental component as well. There's this interesting kind of reaction range that says, that all of us have a certain kind of potential, probably the genetic component, and then depending on the type of environment we're in, we either, it influences us within that range. So if I have a lot of potential, but I'm in a deprived environment, my IQ will be lower than somebody who had the same potential in an enriched environment, and that goes across the spectrum. And I think that actually makes sense. Some of the estimates say the environment is about 57%, about half of it, and the genetics are the other half. So 57% is huge, though. That means you can make a significant impact on IQ if you have the right environmental factors or influences. Again, there's some evidence here that maybe some of the group differences interact with the environment, so that genetics is more important maybe in affluent versus non-affluent environments. And there's another, and we'll talk about this in the journal entries, a lot of controversy over racial differences and how these tests are biased, but people grow up in different environments and microenvironments, and so we have some interesting discussion questions associated with that, so I won't go into it. Another interesting phenomena, the Flynn effect, shows that somehow IQs are increasing by maybe 3 points every 10 years. People seem to be getting more intelligent. It's unclear if they really are, or if people are getting better at taking the test, or it has something to do with diet, or something like that. But they have to renorm these tests because of this kind of Flynn effect. And I think I already mentioned, are people stimulated more? Nutrition is better. Their reasoning ability is better. There's a lot of potential explanations here for that. Some interesting research, the Pygmalion effect, where they had told some teachers that these students had taken a test, and that some students did well and some students didn't do well. And it was interesting that the way the teachers interacted with the students, that it really did end up influencing the students, where it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The students that were kind of indicated to be intelligent, actually, because of their interactions with the teacher, were kind of a little bit more intelligent by the end, and so on and so forth. So again, these tests are powerful, and we have to watch that they don't become some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. There's some limited evidence that you can improve IQ. Head Start programs, have shown some short-term IQ gains that tend to evaporate over time. But some of these more involved projects like Abecedarian, where these kids got a lot of intellectual, medical, and nutritional enrichment for full 5 years, there you saw long-term boosts in IQ. So you can create an environment. It takes a lot of resources to help that can really influence IQ. There's the old term of mental retardation has been replaced with intellectual disability, IQs of less than 70. But a big country like ours, that could be 4 to 7 Americans. Sometimes these folks, have intellectual disabilities, but they have islands of excellence, like Kim Peek, and somebody who has a severe kind of brain injury but has this incredible memory. It's just fascinating. And there are a variety of reasons that contribute to mental retardation or intellectual disability. Some genetic and some environmental. You can take a look at those, or sometimes a combination. And then the opposite is the gifted. Some people use a cutoff of 140, others 150, but there are certain people that score very high on these tests, and it's very rare. If you're above 150, you're probably much less than 1% of the population, and these folks are prodigies or gifted, and there's been a lot of interest in studying them as well. I think some of the videos that I have for you to look at kind of highlight some of these things, but again, this is kind of intelligence in a nutshell. Thanks, bye.